I like what your T-shirt says. Mom's gonna snap.
Thank you. I won this when I was pregnant with Sebastian, I think.
Uh-huh.
So it's a nice sleep shirt now because I got it like 3 sizes too big on purpose to cover my belly.
Oh, well, we
Anyways.
can't see it, so no worries. Talking about snapping and being a mom, I know that you have to be really careful with your energy and hence with the time when you decide to do things or not, or maybe change it. So if you really need your energy and you can't have too many distractions, what do you do in order to prevent from snapping?
Oh, that's a good one. So like losing my temper.
Yeah.
Uh, so a lot of that has to be done as like prep work, like ahead of time, setting yourself up because there's a lot of things that will interfere with your ability to keep your cool. And I'm not using these as excuses, but I know for me these are things that will definitely lower my tolerance for a lot of things, especially like whining. Like I almost have zero tolerance for whining, and I won't snap, but I make it very clear that it's just not tolerated. But so I'm not gonna say I don't eat sugar, but I have very very low sugar. I watch my sugar intake pretty fairly closely because it affects my mood, it affects my energy, and it makes me can cause more pain, more inflammation, makes me sluggish. There's just a whole laundry list of reasons. Dairy's the same way, so I avoid dairy. Um, for me, I tend to be snappier when I have not had enough sleep or not had quality sleep. It for me that is probably the biggest thing besides what I'm eating that lowers my tolerance for different things. And then honestly, if I get myself in a situation where, or I've had a bad night of sleep, I try to be really mindful of the fact that it's not necessarily what the kids are doing that's bothering me. It's the fact that my tolerance for certain normal kid things is way lower than just for people in general at that point. Um, but that doesn't always work, right? Because we're human. So I still snap at my kids. And the thing that I do is make sure that when I calm myself down and I walk away so that doesn't escalate and I'm not screaming at them unnecessarily or anything. Because not like 80% of the time, it's not necessarily what they're doing, it's how we're feeling about what they're doing. Sometimes they are doing things on purpose to try to annoy the hell out of each other. They're little ones, they're boys. They do that. They have that kind of dynamic at this age. Um, but it's not in most of these instances for me. It's more how I'm feeling versus what is it that they're actually doing. So if I do end up snapping at them, I walk away, I step away, I calm myself down, and then I come back and I immediately apologize for my behavior because it doesn't matter what they're doing. Um, it doesn't warrant being screamed at, and it doesn't warrant being yelled at or whatever. Usually that's about as far as it goes. Is I'll yell and I'll scream, and sometimes I swear. I do. I don't swear at my kids, but I definitely have sworn like in their presence. And I make sure to apologize for my behavior, explain what it is that I did wrong. Um, I should have done this instead of this. I should have, because I'm setting them up for learning from my mistakes. So
Do
in
they
those
understand?
moments,
Do you think they understand that when you're tired or you're in a lot of pain or whatever, that's the moment that you get snappy or you might yell at them?
I do tell them that, but I also explain to them that's still no excuse to behave a certain way. Because I can't blame my behavior. Um, I can't expect them how do I explain this? So I expect them to have compassion and to try to be more gentle to people when they're not feeling well and whatnot. But at the same time, it's not their responsibility to make me feel a certain way. It's mine. And by teaching that and embodying that, that's a huge thing for them for the future. It has backfired in my face a few times, especially with them being 8 and 5. My 8-year-old has caught on and is saying things like, well, it's not my responsibility to make him feel good, or I'm not responsible for his feelings. I'm like, yeah, but you're purposely in his face, irritating him, calling him names, and you're being unkind right now. So I'm not saying like you're purposely trying to upset him, and you're responsible for your behavior, which was being rude and obnoxious and name calling, which is not allowed in my house. So it's really, like I said, just doing the best that I can, managing my energy the best I can, staying away from the sweets, trying to get a good sleep, setting myself up for a good sleep. But using myself as an example and pointing out specifically what it was that I did not like about my own behavior and what I could have done better and what I'm going to work on, because I'm sorry is useless if you're not going to try to change your behavior. It doesn't mean anything and it's empty. And I want to do better with my younger two than I did with my older two. And I want to set them up for being emotionally intelligent, responsible, kind human beings. So.
Well, you got quite a task ahead of you. I applaud you for doing so. Kudos.
Thank you.
Especially when you're tired, that you try to refrain from snapping. So, just one other question. Say that you feel like, okay, this is the moment that I'm going to do X, Y, Z. So you're like, I'm really in the momentum and I got the energy. So what if you have to choose between you feel good enough to do that one thing that you really needed to build the energy for, but there's something else that you need to do too? How would you juggle between the two of them?
So that really boils down to what your core values are and your priorities. And that's going to be different for everyone. And it can also vary from day to day. So like I was talking about earlier, since I've been so head down working on my course, but I'm still making time for my kids because they are a bigger priority than having a perfectly clean house for me, especially when I had OCD, clinical OCD, and spent nearly 2 decades of my life doing nothing but making sure everything was perfect and clean all the time. And that meant telling my kids I couldn't spend time with them. I refuse to do that anymore. So for me, my priorities are, my health and taking care of myself, and then my kids, taking care of them. And then the other stuff kind of comes in after that. So it really just, so I've been spending all this time on my course and I've been hanging out with them, but the house, I kind of neglected the house for a while. So today my priorities were not trying to figure out other ways to market my program. Today my priority was getting my house cleaned up so that I could feel better about that. And then my next priority was hanging out with my 8-year-old when he got home from school. And then after that, I had some time to do some other things. So really just, again, it took me a long time to get to this place because the hierarchy in my brain used to be completely different and completely out of whack, just to be honest, where I was nowhere near the top. I was somewhere near the bottom, and that cost me my health. And so it's shifted as my perception and priorities, my priorities shifted as my perception shifted. And then my priorities now help me keep my perspective intact, basically, about what needs to get done and what can wait.
Woohoo! Woohoo! All right, great job, ladies.
Lady Lexi, I was starting to look at the chat and then I came back up on the screen. Can you can you say your question to me? Because I'm having a hard time understanding it, reading it, and I feel like I'm missing something. So maybe I can answer it for you.
Let's see, what did I write?
Let me see if I can find it. Lady Lexi, what was your
question? Oh, well, I said, you must know I do not have children, so I don't have to keep an eye on anyone or anything. Um, but when circumstances would be ideal,
Okay.
when I think from I've got the energy, I've got the momentum, and then people start pulling at me, or better said, I let them go ahead of me. So I give them my valuable time. I I tend to notice that I get all hyper and I get frustrated. And if I get hyper and I get frustrated, I'm not a good person to be around. Because I really need to release all that energy. So so my question was, because you do have children, do you relate to this? Do you have something similar, or do you feel something similar? And how do you keep that hyper feeling in check? But I know I'm extremely hyper at times.
So for me, my explanation is going to be slightly on the spiritual / woo-woo side. When you're feeling that you're really out of alignment with your inner self, which is also related to your core values, but your inner self is trying to steer you in another direction, and you're putting up the resistance and fighting back by giving your energy away to other people who should not be your priority at that point in time. And it is something that I've been encountering a lot more, especially making this shift from making physical products into coaching. And I'm on here all the time. I can't be constantly interrupted like I could be when I was making t-shirts or hoodies or whatever, apparel all the time. And my workspace is in the middle of the dining room, well, a corner of our dining room. But I was 100% accessible 24/7. And I kind of got used to being literally tugged at by a 4-year-old. Mommy, mommy, mommy. So when I started doing interviews and whatnot, I found myself having to, or learning to set better boundaries and better expectations from them, and not grooming them basically to continue behaving this way by catering to them every 5 seconds or whatever it is. And especially with my now 5-year-old, I'm teaching him the value of patience, which for a 5-year-old is tough, but I'm not setting my laptop down immediately when he wants some milk. I'm not getting off the phone when he's trying to do something or behave a certain way. And really, this applies to people, anybody in your life that's used to having 24/7 access to you without you saying no or wait. So for me, it's been making subtle shifts. Like I did interviews once or twice a week, and then it picked up, and then it, and I spent more time up here in my bedroom talking to other people. But in the meantime, I'm setting boundaries with him and making him understand that although he is a priority, he's not always my number one priority. I know there's probably a million people that are going to watch this and go, but like I have to be my top priority so that I can pour back into them, have the patience for them, have the, do everything else that I want to do. And, they also have to learn and understand that there are other things that are important to mommy. So, and that was hard for me at first to say, this is not more important than you, but this is when this has to happen at this time. And the thing that you want to do with me can wait 30 minutes. And I promise I will give you X amount of time when I'm done with this thing. Not no, just not right now. That's a big phrase that I've been using for like the past 3 years is, I didn't say no. I said not right now. You have to wait, and then we can do whatever it is, play your game or whatever it is that you want to do. I also got really good at overlapping things. In your case, though, because they're not your children, and I'm assuming they're not people that have to be in your immediate space all the time, I would just suggest starting by setting better boundaries. And you don't have to make this huge boundary leap. It's like a small boundary, another small boundary, because at first it's going to feel really icky and like you're like letting people down. I know for me that was a big thing, was like, I don't want to let everybody down. But I didn't realize that in the process of not letting everybody else down, I was letting myself down because I wasn't getting any of the stuff that was really important for me to get done, because I was putting out fires and doing things for everybody else. So I hope that was helpful. And if you need me to clarify anything, I'm happy to do that.
Well, no, I get it. I have this saying like, you are the rock, and if things start to crumble, you start to crumble. You can't serve your children. I mean, you can be the mom that you need to be. So I totally get it. And I had to learn over the years to say no to people. And it's usually when I schedule something that when it takes longer, that's when, the hyper focus or the hyper feelings start to come in on my part. So
do you feel like anxious hyper? Like, are you feeling like jumpy? Like you're
jumpy. I have a habit of being jumpy normally. So I have had to learn to calm down. So I had to learn, like, there's this steam cooker, and it starts at 1 and then 2 and 3, and from 3 on it goes to 10 plus.
Like a pressure cooker, yeah.
Yeah, so that really works for me. But I've noticed that when I say to people, no, I can't do it right now, because my intonation and my voice might change, because I know that if right now I would go with them, it wouldn't end very well, at least not for me. So my intonation might change, and it would be strict no. Same like, for instance, when this might come across a little bit rude, my behavior, but recently I was at the GP and I had my crutches in the car. So there were people just coming in front of me in line, which was okay by me when I was waiting to ask my question. But I needed to know whether I needed to get my crutches out of the car. I needed to know if it was going to be a long time or not, because if it was going to be a long time, I would be in pain, and that would, that there was no necessity for it. So when the guy turned around for a sec, I asked him, do you know if this is going to be a long time? Because if it is, I'm going to walk to my car and get my crutches. And he just looked at me, he stared at me, he got a total blank. And I looked at him and I said, that was the question. And then he started screaming. He was so annoyed. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'll just go to the car and I'll get my crutches. And then I started talking to someone else, and you could really see it. And he actually said it. How do you have the nerve to ask me that question, when I was like, okay, I get it that you want to have talk to that, but what do you want me to do? Tap on your shoulder, sit on the floor? I mean, I've sat down on the floor, in shops and all that stuff, if needed, but especially the car was just 2 meters away, so it was like,
it sounds to me like, you're getting nervous when things take longer than normal because of what other people's reactions are going to be. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could say. Yeah.
Okay, so I've experienced that with certain people. I just had a conversation with my husband about that I was like, I'm not doing this thing that I do anymore, because I know it's not you that caused the problem in the first place. And by not speaking up, I'm just making the problem worse, and it's never going to get fixed. But I was afraid to say anything to him about this for a long time, because I was afraid of backlash, and that's a people pleasing, and that's from past trauma. So I would wager to guess that this is, I remember you talking about the differences between your mom and your dad in the past, and the way they you couldn't talk about stuff, around your dad. And
good memory.
I wager a guess that this might have something to do with that, and you might have some unpacking to do, because we're worried that we are going to upset someone, or going to be a disappointment to them, or we're not going to fulfill what it is that we said. And we, in our minds, blow it way out of proportion when the other person's like, that really wasn't that big of a deal. And not in every case, obviously, but in a lot of cases, things are running over, we're running late, and the other person's understanding, and we're standing here beating ourselves up over it.
Lady Lexi, last words.
Well, I'll just get
It's
into
like,
the no for a sec. I do know how to say no. I had to learn it. That's correct.
mm-hmm.
Now, if just other people would understand when I say no, I mean no, and there's no discussion, and you can be upset with me all you want, that would make the world a little bit easier. And I guess that the ones who had to learn to set boundaries, they get it. But those who haven't, that's, there's the challenge.